let's talk about some of the other big stories. In fact, should we do some of the front pages, and then we'll talk to Connor, who's in the studio. Connor Tomlinson, campaigner. Are you a campaigner and political commentator?
It says political commentator there. Also hosts a little show called Lotus Eaters. So
Lotus Eaters.
Yes.
All right. Now, let's do the front pages you're waking up to this morning. I'll try and get through them without vomiting.
Well, you started with the worst one for that.
I know, it's Daily Star. They've tossed aside the lettuce, and now they're serving up the aubergine.
I mean, God bless whoever does their photoshops, because it must be the most fun job in the world.
It must. But the only thing I'll say about the Daily Star is that they do need to... Have we got any of these papers that are coming up on the screen? Are we putting any of them on there? In the process of. That the only thing is that I think that they need to not flog it too much.
Yeah.
Because I think that I love their comedy front page, but they seem to do one every single time now.
Yeah, but
and you lose their effect.
It's almost like a British institution to just be that little bit naff. You know what I mean? Like the Carry On films are as much a cultural staple as the monarchy is. I mean, so we do need a little bit of cheesy mockery.
They're actually openly just saying Rishi 5 to 6 odds, 6 to 5 on, bozo. They're not even using his name, bozo. I mean, he is literally just a laughingstock clown, right?
Yeah, from my perspective, yes. However, from a large swath of the British public, no. And I don't get it. I still don't understand how I, very much like everyone else, was excited when he was in the running in 2019, because he had the Mr. Bean quality of he was stuck on the zip line and waving the flags, but he was also promising good policy. And then lockdown kicks in, and he gets on board with the global net zero hegemon of basically crashing our energy security for windmills, and then locks in our home and says we need to have a national conversation about mandatory vaccination. But it seems to be that the leadership race and Liz Truss's very short tenure has been so exhausting and irritating that everyone's got amnesia about how bad he actually was.
I mean, the problem I have, as I said, is I've no idea what he stands for. And years of covering Boris Johnson, no idea what he stands for. And also, I cannot name one thing he did that was a proactive policy decision as Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority. I honestly, I implore you to call me and tell me one thing he actually did, a proactive policy decision. Can you think of one?
No, genuinely. It's like, you hear this all the time, 12 years of Tory rule and what they got to show for it, and left-wingers always say, oh, austerity. Sorry, the public deficit is colossal. What did they actually really properly cut spending on or have any fiscal responsibility on at all? The NHS spending is record every year, just can't keep pace with demand. They haven't done anything in the 12 years of Conservative rule.
Also, interestingly, because I have a lot of these arguments on various shows, people seem to forget that in 2010, the electorate, perhaps not with an overwhelming majority in it in the coalition, but they voted for austerity. David Cameron stood on an austerity platform. He and the very agencies that were criticising Liz Truss, and that criticism was, I think, fair when it came to the implementation of her policies. Too far, too fast, without being costed. I thought the bones of them actually were not that bad, but it just wasn't implemented in a competent way. But those very same agencies were praising the UK, like, you know, Christine Lagarde, the IMF, for actually cutting spending back in 2010. So it wasn't like the Conservatives did all of that with no mandate. That was what they stood on. The two times that the Conservatives recently have been elected, recent decades, I should say. 1979, they stood on a platform of austerity. 2010, they stood on a platform of austerity. So sometimes the British public says, you know what, we need to get our finances under control. And a lot of commentators you speak to seem to think that the Conservatives were brought in to do all of this amazing spending, and that they U-turned on it. They didn't.
No. Well, there's this sort of weird consensus at the moment you see from all these international institutions like the UN, like the IMF, like the Bank of International Settlements, that says, because massive climate change is coming down the pike, we just need to blow up our economies and spending be damned, and we just need to focus really monomaniacally on this single issue. And Liz Truss seems to have been like a speed bump in that, especially considering she said to Charles, don't go to COP, we might reopen fracking. And look how quickly she got ousted by the media, who... Same with Boris. I hated Partygate, for example. I thought ridiculous affair, particularly when he locked us down and it wasn't right. However, the media didn't do that on principle. They just wanted him gone. The same forces mobilised here. And then you had the markets. People keep saying, oh, the markets got spooked. I mean, number one, Jeremy Hunt's primary advisor is a portfolio manager for BlackRock, right? They're the ones obsessed with getting every energy company on the board with ESGs, which is you've got to invest loads in renewables or we're not going to fund you. So they're massive climate market shapers. And then there was an article in Fortune the other day, Fortune magazine, that said, oh, we're so worried about the economic implications of Trustonomics, we should bring back the 90s thing and short the pound artificially. And it's like, but that's really worrying.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Firstly, I do believe the media was right to hold Boris to account for Partygate, and I think you're contradicting yourself a little bit there, because Boris was a high public spending, no ideology, net zero character. Well, there is this sort of establishment conspiracy around those things, they should have been backing Boris over Partygate. They would have been laying off him over that rather than holding him to account over it.
Yeah, so he was a Brexiteer. So
he wasn't. Don't be so ridiculous.
No.
Boris was not a Brexiteer.
He did it very poorly. However, he was willing to go with the British public on that. This is what I've said about they keep calling like Georgia Maloney and all that far right. Far right just seems to be a label on anything they don't like. If we had a jury system for government service, you'd get the most quote-unquote far-right government in the world, because the British public are far further to the right of the Conservatives on immigration, for example. They're far more in the Suella Braverman camp than they are in the Liz Truss camp. So Boris understood, very politically astutely, that he had to run to the right in the polls, and as soon as he gets in, he's got to listen to his missus all the time, who's obsessed with green
because
issues.
there is an organ that he thinks with, and it ain't his brain.
Yeah, I agree with that. We've seen that for his entire career.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree that the British media are if there was anything... This is interesting, because I see it completely differently. I think that the British media are overwhelmingly pro-Brexit. If you're talking about the print media, BBC agreed, probably not, but The Sun, the Mail...
Mirror...
The Guardian and the Mirror. Those are the only two you can mention which don't have the massive circulations of some of the other.
Also, global media, which then obviously all invest in each other. I mean, you've got these journalism training programmes that all funnel money to each other, for example. So there's a large amount of market forces and the media forces.
But could it also be,
him.
dare I say, God, I'm going to get lynched when I leave the studio for saying this, perhaps Brexit wasn't the best idea and the media was just holding up a mirror to the fact that it wasn't the best idea.
No, it was bungled, because, of course, we basically paid a giant divorce settlement but are still subject to EU law.
Because Brexit was never going to achieve us not being subject to EU law. If ever we wanted to export to the EU, of course we were going to be subject to EU law.
Of course, they're not going to cancel all of our exports. Not being funny.
No, but
they wouldn't be able to afford to.
No, but I know that. But it's. I think it's a. And I'm not being a Ramona by saying this. I'm just literally stating a fact.
I can see you dancing around the landmines as is.
I know. I have to, because I'll get 20 texts of people going, "Oh my God, you're a Ramona." I'm just stating facts here. That whatever your industry and whatever your view is on Brexit, there are people who are pro-Brexit who would have to face this. If you are exporting to a country or a group of countries that has a certain set of rules, and you want to sell into those sets of countries, well, then you are subject to those rules. So if I'm selling car lights and I want to export them to the EU, then I have to make those car lights to the specifications of the EU without having a say on what those specifications are. So, whereas before we did. Now, that's us being subject to EU laws, but that's not some sort of crazy conspiracy. That's just
I didn't say it was
crazy
conspiracy.
No, I know. Some people will think it is, but that is what needs to happen for us to facilitate the trade, and that is actually a slight loss of sovereignty. Now, we can make two decisions from that. We can say, well, we don't want to trade with them, or we can say we have to follow, unfortunately, those rules that we no longer have a say in, because that's if we want to sell into that nation. And that wouldn't just apply to the EU, it would apply to America. It applied to any country we want to export to. So there was never a version of Brexit, if we wanted to still export, that was going to stop us needing to follow other countries' rules.
So there's a couple of things there. Building specification is not necessarily following the legal prescription. So if you look at the environmental regulations, for example, loads of them are still unanimous to think that the common fisheries policy, they're basically identical, right? And that means we waste loads of stuff. So we didn't take advantage as we should have to overhaul things like that. Then there's also things like policing. So I had a chat with Harry Miller of Faircop, who's been on the show plenty of times, and he recently helped me out because after we last spoke, I went to Conservative Party conference and I was threatened with a public order offence by a police officer for filming a debate that a street preacher was having with a local journalist. And he actually said to me, it's funny, the police, without actually being held legally to account, are still abiding by EU guidelines, even though they're not meant to.
But it's always like Boris is a massive Remainer, isn't it?
It's not even the Boris is a massive Remainer. It's that the Tory party is this gigantic immobile blob that's been crusted over by careerists throughout the last how long?
Well, the biggest one was Boris Johnson. I'm sorry, he was a Remainer.
I'm not defending Boris. I don't want him to come back.
He was a Remainer his entire career. He decided to get on board the Brexit bus because it furthered his career. And then you're quite right, when it came to actually, I remember reading a front page where it said that they were going to bring speed limiters into cars, right? And Boris Johnson was quite saying, we're going to go along with that. The EU are doing that. We don't need to, but we want to, because he's a massive Remainer, and he knows he sold a busted flush to the people. He knows he sold something that he didn't believe in to the British people, and he's been desperately trying to backpedal ever since. And why anyone would want to bring him back on that basis, and I know you don't want to either, is absolutely staggering to me, and why people forget that and let him get away with it, because, I don't know, he's a bit funny and can't keep it in his trousers. That's why he seems to get away with it. I honestly think that we should just stick someone like Penny Mordaunt in.
No.
Why?
Okay, so Penny Mordaunt is about as woke as a number.
But she's a Brexiter. At least we cannot have that conversation anymore that she's a Remainer. Liz Truss was a Remainer. Rishi's a Remainer. Don't we need to just go for broke now and say, look, out of all the candidates, whoever has the most Brexit, you get in?
No, because she has identical policies to the EU, and I don't really care what you say your position on Brexit is if you're going to govern us exactly identically within our own borders. I mean, she was trigger happy on censorship in her own book. She founded, the Edinburgh University, she founded an agricultural reform policy centre with Bill Gates, who's obsessed with the idea of eating entirely synthetic meat. And I don't want to be on...
Let's not forget the
insects.
Exactly.
I don't want to be on Bill Gates' diet. If you've seen him, not just going for ad hominems, but really, I mean, also, he built computers. He's not exactly a genius of farmland. He's just been buying lots and lots of
it. I mean, what other option is there? Because, I'm sorry, I do believe, and I say this with love, that a lot of the benefits that were sold as to what would happen when we left the EU were great benefits on paper, but when it comes to a practical way in which you deal with other countries, it's just not practical. And whoever you stick in there is going to face those problems.
Not necessarily. I mean, the execution was really poor. I agree with you on that. But it's also not just an economic argument. This is actually the main problem of the Tories. They're materialists. All they're talking about is GDP go up. That's why the immigration battle that's descended into hell when Suella Braverman started talking about civilization and culture, and Liz Truss was just like, nope, bar graph, we want it to go up, growth eternally. So
don't you agree that for some, I thought that was again one of the big benefits of Brexit, because when I saw Liz Truss saying, well, actually we need to let certain people in for certain jobs, I actually thought, well, that's exactly what Brexit was. Brexit was, look, we'll pick and choose when we need a certain set of people for a certain sector. Isn't that exactly what Brexit is?
Yeah, but we're not picking and choosing. So we've had mass amounts of refugee resettlement schemes with no plan to send people back. And people like the Hong Kongers, for example, which we got the country into that mess, I completely understand that. But you also need a pathway to repatriation. Then we had over 1 million visas handed out last year. The student visas are only going up, and they're largely subsidised by the Chinese government. We've had about a 40% increase in Chinese students, and they are taking a hell of a lot of our training. They're pushing prices for student accommodation and fees up massively. We can't have this many people that come into the country and need public services on demand.
They would argue, and I don't disagree with some of what you said there, but they would argue, well, it's money for the universities because the government doesn't subsidise them anymore.
It's money.
Let's have a quick chat with Rodney in Brighton, who's been very, very patient. Hi there, Rodney.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you. So you're a Tory party member. Who did you vote for, firstly, in the last election?
Well, I went at Penny or Kemi Baynock, but I didn't get that choice, so I had to choose Rishi Sunak because I'm a fiscal conservative.
And, I mean, Kemi not being on the ballot, and Kemi, I don't think, making it on the ballot this time, is an absolute travesty because I really thought that she was, without a doubt, the most impressive candidate.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what the members wanted because they wanted to break from the Johnson clownness, but the ineptitude and the arrogance of the Tory MPs didn't give us that choice. So now we're just stuck now, and you know, and I'm sick and tired of the media and everybody blaming the members. It's just like it's ridiculous. We're like, if you ask most members, everybody wanted a change. You know, and like, there's no voice out there saying, you know what, the members wanted different.
You know, that's true. I don't think it's the members' fault, because if it was down to the members, I think Kemi would have got in. I don't think it should be down to... It should either be 100% down to the MPs or 100% down to the members. I don't think that you can have this mixture of both, because then the members end up with candidates that they didn't really want, and then the MPs end up with a winner that they didn't really want, and it sort of is this strange hybrid where no one's happy.
And that's the thing. That's something we got to decide, and it's too late now because we're going to lose the next general election. Anybody knows we're done for in 2024. We just need that caretaker government to take us 24.
I can't quite get my head around that, Rodney, that an 80-seat majority could be done for by the next Parliament. It's actually staggering to think that that could be such a wasted opportunity, and there has been a wasted opportunity. I might have disliked Boris's stance and everything about his lack of honesty, but at least I had some relief when he was elected that at last we've got actual government that can do stuff rather than the limbo of the previous 9 years, and nothing at all has been done. Rodney, thank you. Dead as a dodo says, "Oh dear, Cristo, you are stating your fact, and as usual, you're letting your anti-Boris stance show." Well, again, dead as a dodo, tell me, when I said I was stating fact, I said that if you want to export a product to another country, you will be subject to that country's laws regarding the specifications for that product. In what way is that not a fact? Seriously, reply. What way is that not a fact? Is that a fact, Con?
Seems logical. The other sectors, I have major problems with them not needing to abide by the EU rules.
Perhaps service sectors, I think you are right, because you're not exporting, but you are going to be subject, if you're exporting especially a product, food or whatever, car lights, light bulbs, I don't know why I'm light obsessed when it comes to this, clocks, anything, you're going to be subject to those laws without saying those laws. That is just what happens when you export, because they might have certain specifications on products that they have decided via their laws that we don't. Now, I totally take it on board. If you're going to say to me, well, look, why are the UK taking on board those laws themselves if they're not a good idea? And I would completely agree with you on that. But it's a fact, if you're going to export to another country and you want to, and it's not just the EU, it's any country in the world, if that product has a different specification in that country and you want to export it, you are subject to those specifications, which are written in law. OK, when we come back, we'll talk more about this. We'll talk about the Tory leaderships. We'll talk about Just Stop Oil as well. Oh, we do love those. And we'll do the rest of the front pages, all here live from the Talk Radio studio. This is Talk TV. Morning. So we've talked about Boris with Connor Tomlinson, campaigner and political commentator, and that's obviously got us talking about Brexit again. Brexit. But we're having a nice conversation. Yeah. We're not actually having a big ding-dong about it all. But
it's too early to get the knives out, isn't it?
It is too early, and also it's pointless. I mean, I'm going to talk to Femi a little later on. Femi Oluwole. I like Femi.
He's going to bring his keyboard out again.
He might do. When he did his, he serenaded me on my show. Did you? I forgot about that.
You're so welcome.
Completely forgot about that. But he's going to talk. For instance, I was on a TV show with Femi a couple of weeks ago, and you know, people are well aware on this station that I am not a fan of Brexit, but I sort of accept that that's where we are now. He's going to talk today about the Rejoin the EU demo in London. I don't think we should. I really don't think we should rejoin the EU. We are where we are, and although I don't like it, I was actually on a panel with 4 other people who were all... It was a panel of 5 Remainers. It was very balanced. But I was the only one saying, well, we can't.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps there was an argument prior to 2019 when there was no government that had a mandate for the kind of Brexit that we wanted, because there were hung parliaments. There was an argument for it. I'm not saying 100% we should have had another referendum, but at least you can understand the logic of why people would say... I mean, you're looking very distressed at that. But you can understand the logic of people saying, well, look, no government had a mandate for the kind of Brexit that we wanted. Theresa May didn't. Jeremy Corbyn didn't. No one did. Lib Dems didn't. No one did. But after 2019, where Boris's slogan was "Get Brexit done," and he won, argument over. That's decisive now. And so, as much as I hate it, I think probably, I don't know, 20 years after the last referendum would be an acceptable amount of time if they were going to do another one. I'd say the same with the Scottish independence as well. You have to have 2 decades in between each one.
I think there's a slight difference in the Scottish independence one, just because I'm so sick of hearing it. I'm kind of just happy to let them have it go. I'm sick of paying for it. I'm bored, sorry. Look, I'm sure Ian Blackford, funnily enough, would actually be quite funny to have a drink with. But every time he gets up in Parliament and slams his hand about Scottish independence, just leave, please.
Go.
Yeah, but
do you know we'd need a border, though?
Yeah, we would, yeah.
We needed one in Ireland.
Look, I agree. We'll kind of figure it out. I'll rebuild Hadrian's Wall at this point. I'm just tired of hearing about it. The EU thing, though, right?
Yeah.
The frustration is, and this is, you saw this outside the Tory party conference, and now you see this symptomatic of actually the Tory leadership race. There is a contempt for a large contingency of the British electorate that aren't going along with what you could call just the consensus. It's like the idea of global Britain, the idea of an increasing amount of technology in governance, the idea that Jeremy Hunt should be Chancellor, even though he's roundly rejected by the electorate for his stances on lockdown and his business connections with China, but still in there anyway. The idea, for example, that all the MPs are pushing for Rishi Sunak when he did lose the leadership race to the members, and now, and again, neither of us want Boris back, but he's definitely the most popular with the members. But they're still going, no, anyone but Boris. We've got to unify to get him out. There is a contempt openly for a large sector of the British public who aren't going along with what the politicians believe is best for us.
But I also think that this sort of idea that, we've got to have Boris because he's got the mandate and he's popular with the members. Well, no one was arguing to bring back Blair in 2010. No one was arguing in 92. Well, actually, that's a lie. I was arguing in 92. What the hell did you do getting rid of Thatcher, you absolute insane people? And I was devastated when she went. But, this idea that, we must have the person that won the election. People don't just vote for a person. They vote for a party or they vote for their MP. I don't think they just vote for Boris.
I think they do at this point, though.
Oh,
I think they do at this point. I mean,
all right, let's go to France. Talk to John. Hi, John.
Good morning, Cristo.
Now,
how are you?
Fine, thank you. Now, you want to talk about whether Boris is the answer.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but you asked what did he do. One thing he did do, I believe, is he changed the law on, or the policy on fracking. It's going through Parliament now, isn't it? Which they won the other night.
That was Liz Truss that did that.
It was Kwasi Kwarteng as Business and Energy Minister.
I think it was before that. It was all going in, and it would have been right at the end of his premiership. I'm sure that it was Johnson. I stand to be corrected, but I think it was Johnson, not Truss.
Boris Johnson has said, Boris Johnson's words.
But he voted against it.
Boris Johnson's words on the record obviously are absolutely not indicative of what his opinion might be on something. Let's remember that. But on the 1st of September, he said that he would not give his support for fracking in the North Sea.
You've been researching it.
He took aim at supporters of fracking, and he opened the door to it, you're right, in response to Ukraine. However, he's ended up voting against it. So that just goes to show exactly what Boris thinks about things.
That surprised me. Right, going on.
So he did. Sorry. So he was the one that paved the way for it, and then decided to vote against it. Does that not tell you all you need to know about him?
Well, I'm not convinced that we should have him back, but as long as it's a Brexit Prime Minister, I think then we were going to go in the right direction. With Truss and Hunt, and I can't believe Shapps is the Home Secretary. I just cannot. After the total cock-up he made of motorways and the highway code, I nearly fell off my chair.
Let's not forget low-traffic neighbourhoods as well, those really democratic things,
Shapps,
where the cycling revolution, which we're still waiting to happen.
Yeah, the other thing you were saying about cars. Now, the fact of the matter is that the UK is the customer on the vast majority of trade between the United Kingdom and the European Union. Germany's manufacturers call Great Britain Fantasy. Is it Fantasy Island? Yeah, Fantasy Island. We don't export hardly anything to the EU anyway. Never did. Now the cars I see down here on French roads, once a week I might see a Land Rover. I mean, there's no Rovers left, obviously. It's just Land Rovers and Jaguars. I see so few. You go outside your studio.
Exports to EU countries were at exports to EU countries from the UK were at 17.4 billion in July 2022.
What about the other way round?
Well, you just said about us doing it to them, though.
Did you say that was 17 billion into the UK?
No, exports. You just said exports. We don't export anything to the EU.
Very little.
Well, I've just told you, £17.4 billion. That's quite a lot, I'd say.
In a £1 trillion economy.
That's the highest that it's ever been.
In a £1 trillion economy, 17 billion. Wow.
You don't think that 17 billion is quite a lot?
Out of £1 trillion? No, it's not, is it? The vast majority of trade between Great Britain and the EU is BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, Citroën, Porsche, Peugeot, Renault, Volvo. What do we export into the EU?
The UK is the EU's third biggest trading partner.
Well, they probably haven't got very big trading partners then.
Of 27 countries. I mean, I don't know, Connor. Am I wrong here in thinking that he's being?
I'd quite like 17 billion. My main issue with
that's not a lot.
Trade is actually that we've allowed China to become our biggest trade partner during COVID. So we basically rewarded them for it.
It's not a great deal, isn't it?
No. Well, perhaps I didn't make myself clear. That 17 billion was for July alone, just July alone. In 2020 there were 251 billion pounds, 42% of all UK exports.
You come over here and see how many British cars driving on
the
road.
So what you have seen is more important than the actual figures. How many Land Rovers you might see on the road is more important than billions of pounds.
But, hold on, the point I wanted to make.
Well, listen, John, we'll hold you, and you can come back after 6 o'clock and make the second point. I don't want you to think you're not getting your time on air when we come back, all here on Talk TV. Morning, still joined in the studio by Connor Tomlinson, campaigner and political commentator. We'll talk to Femi a little later this hour as well. Rishi Sunak is still 10 to 7 on, which is 7 to 10. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As becoming Prime Minister. Boris Johnson in second place now, 9 to 4. I mean, we were just talking in the news. Like the brass neck. I mean, you've got to give him credit. If I had partied, lied to Parliament about it, whilst people went to funerals alone of their loved ones and said goodbye to them on Zoom, I would lock myself away in shame for as long as I could. He doesn't give. He wants to come back and do the job again.
Well, Liz Truss, as I said to you off air, she is the shortest tenured Prime Minister in history, right? National embarrassment. Whether or not you feel sorry for her.
I do feel a bit sorry for her, actually.
Yeah, I think she bungled her economic policies, especially the announcements, and couldn't stand behind them because, let's be fair, she was a bit of a blabbering buffoon.
And she it's so weird that it was like, okay, we've got these great ideas about low tax, great, into that. Focusing on growth, great, I'm into that. And all of those things. And it was like day one.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to throw absolutely everything at the wall. Yeah. I'm not going to do it anyway gradually. And also, what do you think you should cost these things? Do you think that we should just make sure that we reassure everyone that we know what we're doing? No.
Yep.
We're just going to throw everything at the wall. I mean, it's kind of staggering, really.
Yeah. Well, I thought a lot of the outrage was artificially inflated. But then the fact that now, it's not like she's going to get speech tours that all the prime ministers often get when they leave. She's never going to have a career again. Genuinely, it goes down in the history books as one of the biggest catastrophic screw-ups. Whereas Boris did a hell of a lot of awfulness. Again, he said we need to have a conversation about mandatory vaccination. That's tyranny, and he can come back just because people think he's funny.
And it's true. And he absolutely 100% categorically said that there would never be vaccine passports. And that was an outright lie. Yeah. And that's unbelievable. A Conservative Prime Minister saying that you need a pass. I am pro-vaccine, but I am pro-people making the choice about that. And this idea that you need a document to show a medical procedure to get into your pub.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And how can people... I don't understand how people can figure...
Yeah, and this all comes... I haven't checked Twitter. I imagine it's a mess. This all comes from someone who, on 2019, voted for him, was in the pub as the only Conservative table in a packed-out bar that had been booked by the University Labour Society that Rosie Duffield turned up to as the first Labour MP to win in Canterbury. And we basically football chanted her out of the pub because it was so empty. We were delighted... It's been a monumental disappointment, and the prospect of him coming back to screw up again is just frustrating.
We'll talk about that. By the way, the caller before the news hung up on us, so we didn't get to continue that conversation, but I really am going to look at trade figures rather than how many Land Rovers someone sees on the road. Sorry about that, but that's the truth. We'll talk to Paul in Birmingham in a minute, but I just want to discuss with you then the prospect of a general election, because I said this again on television yesterday, and I will say it again here. I'm still not convinced by Labour's offering, and I could not, when I look at what Labour has done, certainly in my borough on a local level, where they've brought in policies under the cover of COVID to close roads and all sorts like that, ignored consultations, it's like living in some sort of People's Republic. When I've seen what's happened in Hackney here in London, where the same thing has happened. Hackney are now talking about a congestion charge zone. Yeah. I mean, unbelievable. Consultations from residents overwhelmingly against, but the Labour Council saying, no, we know better. Yeah. London, as a whole, if you look at that on a local level, Sadiq Khan has been an absolute disaster for this city, flying 12,000 miles to go on a climate conference and a jolly. The ULEZ, which is now proven to have had absolutely minute effect on London's air, but still he wants to expand it because it's a tax. Crime has never been higher in our city. If those are examples on a local level of what Labour will do when they've got the sniff of power, on a national level, if that was replicated, it makes my blood go cold, frankly. Spoiling your ballot paper? I mean, firstly, should there be an election? Secondly, who on earth would you vote for?
So, on the election point, I don't think we need to murder the government, but they're already committing suicide. So the general election is going to be, I think, expedited. It won't be 2024, it'll be 2023. And we don't need to necessarily speed it up, but it will be coming down the pike. And so I'm just, and I say this as a Conservative member, I'm just kind of consigned to the fact that they're going to lose. What we'll have to do is, while they're spending their time in exile, just point to every single high immigration, neoliberal, internationalist, wants digital currency, and just going, right, you out, you're the reason we lost. Why don't you listen to us for a change? Hopefully that's the best we can make of it.
Bitcoin,
I know. Yeah, I really hate him for that. Because the idea that you're going to tie a digital ID to a digital currency, if you say the wrong thing on social media, boom, there goes your entire life savings.
PayPal. Look at PayPal. What happened with PayPal?
Look at the Canadian truckers.
I agree.
At plenty of other influencers. Horrible idea.
On that, I absolutely agree. We haven't had a Conservative in Downing Street under a Conservative government for as long as I can remember. And on the one hand, I feel a bit sorry for Liz Truss, but on the other, I'm so angry with her because at last we had someone saying things that were mildly conservative. Why didn't she just do it in a way that was remotely competent?
Because she couldn't defend them because she isn't competent, unfortunately. The hope for Liz Truss was at least she could install people that were smarter than her to defend her policies, but she couldn't. And so she got thrown under the bus after Kwasi did. The second point on who to vote for, I will never vote Labour in my life because they are genuinely evil. Like, if you look at what they did with the grooming gangs, and then they appoint a member of Parliament who retweeted an Owen Jones parody account which said they should shut their mouths for the sake of diversity. Keir Starmer recently at Pink News Awards stood up and said, we will make misgendering a hate crime. One of their MPs, it might not be an MP, it might be a party activist, correct me on that, he stood up at the party conference and said, we must make misogyny a hate crime, and that includes critiquing abortion. One of their activists got up and quoted Che Guevara. They're calling each other comrades. They are insane, yet...
And they're papering over all of that. I do not believe for 1 second they are any more united than the Conservative Party.
No.
They are just stifling all of that at the moment so that we don't hear so much about it. I completely agree with. OK, Paul's been really patient, and we must do some front pages, and we've not even spoken about Just Stop Oil.
No.
Paul, hello.
Hello.
Now, what would you like to say?
Well, regarding this European thing, they're dumping all their unemployment on us and people that need housing. Europeans can't house their own people. You know, maybe the Germans can, and they can't.
So are we ending up with a lot of unemployed Europeans here? Is that's what you're saying?
Well, it would happen if we hadn't turned into a Brexit. Yes, we've had a lot of them over here. I mean, there was a young lady there moved in, 3 children. They housed her. They give her all the benefits. Never done a day's work in this country. And who knows where the husband is or where the father of those children are. I mean, it's a con. There was a guy from Belgium came over. He said, I'm looking for... He was given work as associated benefits. He was paid for his house. And at the end of his 2-week holiday from his job in Belgium, he went back to his job. And now the money from the British government is being paid into his bank account.
Those people who are pro-EU, and by the way, I don't disagree that a big flaw of free movement of people was to not have an equal benefit system throughout the whole of Europe, because naturally people would gravitate to a country that offers more, whether that's free education, free healthcare, whatever. And that I agree with. But people who are pro-EU would say, well, hang on, you have the right to go to Belgium if you want to and do the same thing, and that's why it's reciprocal. What would you say to that?
Well, I don't.
Connor's about to have a stroke at the thought of that, which I'll get to you in a minute.
I don't think it is reciprocal, because if you're employed in Germany and you want you want to go and see the doctor, you do have to pay £20 or £30 just for the appointment. So it's not reciprocal at all.
No, okay, and I get that. And actually, Paul, thank you. That was one of the big flaws, without a doubt. And it's fair to say that if you don't have parity of benefits throughout a trading bloc of countries where there are free movement, naturally people will gravitate to the country that offers the most. That's a fair comment, right? Yeah. Whatever side of the debate you're on.
Yeah, but that's purely economic argument. And so people from countries that are more economically deprived in the EU, and now we see massively outside the EU as soon as we've left, we've displaced Bulgarians, Polish workers, etc., for Bangladesh, Pakistan, India now with the trade deal. If you want to come over for purely economic reasons, of course you're going to come to Britain, because you get handed plenty of things by public services. But I don't want to do the same to Belgium because I love my country. I like the culture here. It's not a purely economic argument. And if you have lots and lots of people coming over for purely economic reasons who don't have the time to integrate and don't have vested ties here other than just money they want to send home, you're going to change the face of the country, not racially, culturally. And so it's going to be an unpleasant place to live.
Is there an argument to say that we've had to almost throw the baby out with the bathwater, though? Because one of the reasons that's changed is because the pound having suffered so massively since we left the EU, and that is if you look, I think the pound was at 160 when the referendum was called. It's now at sort of 109 for not just Brexit, but for various reasons. There, yeah. But that has stopped people wanting to then come here in order to send money back home, because there isn't that advantage.
People wanted to come here. There was 1 million people last year. During the
EU, it has.
Oh, no, sorry, EU, yeah.
And so, therefore, you're right, we've stopped people coming from the EU, and that's what people wanted from Brexit.
Yeah, but we didn't want record migration from everywhere else. That's the problem.
But again, if you do it, the problem is that to have promised that to people that it wouldn't happen, I think, was never going to be something that the politicians would ever deliver on.
Yeah, it was a lie, so that's why I hate the politicians for that. I just don't want to be lied to.
Yeah, and we are in agreement on that. For a long time, and this is like my therapy, I found it really difficult to not be furious with the people that voted for it. And it's taken me a long time to get round to actually thinking that I if you voted Leave, I don't hate you. I hate the people that sold you stuff that was never going to happen. I'm so angry about that. I'm angry on behalf of Remainers who got a result they don't like, but actually I'm more angry on behalf of the people who voted Leave who didn't get what they voted for. I'm angry on your behalf as well, because it's not fair. It's not fair. At least if you voted for it, you should get it. Yep. And on that we can agree. And again, that all goes back to Boris. How can you forget that all goes back to Boris? How can you forget that? When we come back, we'll do the front page and talk about Just Stop Oil. We've done Boris enough, and we'll talk about that right here, live from the Talk Radio studio. This is Talk TV. Surely not again. Disgraced ex-PM flies to worm his way back into number 10. Bereaved COVID families join the fury at the shock return. Meanwhile, the Eye... Are we putting any of these on the screen at the moment, or it's not happening? I'm just don't know whether to pause for the next one. No? No. All right, the Eye. Britain's next PM. Sunak leads Johnson. Oh, God. I just honestly think I might have to spoil my ballot paper. Anyway, sorry, I keep talking to you. We'll come back to you in a moment. Boris, I'm up for it. We are going to do this. Meanwhile, the Daily Mail. Could Boris and Rishi now unite to save the Tories? I don't know. Could Michael Foot and Margaret Thatcher have had an affair? Tory tribes go to war, says The Guardian. It's a thoroughly depressing load. Sunak races to secure a majority of Tory MPs, and Johnson will prove fatal. That was the Daily Telegraph. Johnson will prove fatal, says The Times. Yeah, that's where we are. That was thoroughly depressing, Connor Tomlinson.
Yeah, I suppose, unfortunately, speaking of fatalities, Just Stop Oil yesterday.
Oh, well, do you know what? We got some footage, because I was in the street with Just Stop Oil yesterday. So I was coming back from the ITN building, which is Gray's Inn Road, which is near Holborn. Get to the junction in Holborn, and we're behind a bus. Right. So all I can hear is beeping, and I said to my driver, something's going on. You know, my sort of journalistic antennae went up. He says, no, it's just Holborn. I said, no. I said, the beeping, something's going on.
My spider sense is going off.
My spidey sense is going on. And he said, no, we're all right. I said, I'm getting out. I said, something's going on, I'm getting out. You know, which to get me out the car when I'm lazing on the backseat, I mean, that's achievement enough, thanks. Get out the car, and they've all glued themselves to the road again. So that's along Kingsway, along High Holborn, along all these roads. Everyone's completely glued there. It is gridlock. It is chaos. There was a funeral on Kingsway that couldn't get through. There were people on buses. There were people, you know the kind of people, all going about their daily business. I think we've got some footage of what I was filming there, because I went and started filming and tried to have a conversation with them. But, then I realised that I was going to go and push some custard up a hill because it was easier. There they all are. You can see them on screen at the moment, all there with their banners. There was a lovely gentleman, by the way. I was showing him on screen now. You can just see him in the picture. He's wearing a stripy shirt, and he worked for Timpson's, the key cutters. And he crouched down and he tried to reason with them and said, look, what is it you want? What can I do to help you move? He said, I don't want an argument. And people were getting angry. They were spraying them with water and all this stuff. This guy was getting sprayed a bit. I tweeted Timpson's last night, actually, the CEO, and I said, this guy was a credit to you. Because he was having a really reasonable conversation, saying, what can I do? What can we do so that you'll move, so that we can get the traffic moving? Because, what do you want? Like talking to a brick wall. You just want to stop oil. Fossil fuel companies, they're all going to die.
Well, you've seen in Unheard, for example, they all go to these struggle session camps. They all link hands. They all sing Kumbaya, and it's because they've been coached. So their ideas have them. You're not actually talking. That's why it's pointless reason with them. You're not talking to a human being in many respects. You're talking to a robot, and it's because they've just been conditioned. And most of the things they say are just, I say most, other than the words and the, are just nonsense. They're not true.
I agree, and also the problem is, so then I went live, which we're not showing, but you can see all these motorists going furious with them that we're showing on screen at the moment. I went live on Twitter and I went and spoke to some of them, and so their own website and their transition documents that they have on their website about how we get away from oil, and they speak about. I mean, it's all a bit mamby-pamby, some of it, They speak about us having a citizens' assembly to talk about it. They say we don't want to leave anyone in industry behind. None of it actually means anything.
Well, no, the citizens' assembly does mean something. That's genuinely pernicious. It's saying we should have an unelected committee of our activists supersede governments. That's dictatorship.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
And you're quite right. That's one way of putting it, but you're right. But they also say that one of their demands in just stopping oil, they say we've got enough oil for 8 years.
No, we don't.
Right? And that if we stopped now, that's how much we would have left. We've got 8 years' worth.
Yeah.
And so we should stop now, start using that 8 years' worth left. But one of their demands is that the government puts more money into developing the battery capacity for renewables.
Yeah.
So essentially, if you join the dots of that argument, they're asking us to stop oil for something that's not been invented yet, because, of course, battery power for renewables exists, but not in a way that would run a grid.
Do you know how much it costs?
Billions,
No. I did the number on it. If you took the global battery manufacturing capacity, modelled on Tesla's Hornsdale facility in Australia, the largest possible, 3 trillion before inflation, this was over a year ago, and it would only meet 26% of energy demand because you can't store it. So we would have rolling blackouts that result in deaths.
Yes.
Yeah, but they don't seem to care about that.
You need to be able to run the grid at a constant level so that everyone, when they switch their lights on, turns their kettle on, has the power. Which is why renewables are brilliant when you know that it's going to be particularly windy or when it's particularly, sunny, and that you can run part of your grid on renewables. You can have it as there, but you can't run a whole grid on renewables. So now, do you know how many of their activists don't know this?
Yeah.
And I said, no, it's there. The renewable technology is there. And I said to them, but it's on your own website.
Yeah.
How do you not know that you're asking for something that hasn't been invented yet? No, it's not. You can't. This lady said to me, you can't expect me to have read the website. You can't expect me to have read every part of the Just Stop Oil website. I said, why am I quoting to you what's on your website? Why am I telling you what it is that is possible or not, which I've got from your own website? Well, I'm afraid we'll have to agree to disagree. And I was like a dog with a bone. I said, no, we can't agree to disagree because it's on your own website. And she came up with this hilarious argument I mentioned at the top of the show, which was, she said, well, you can't expect me to know everything. What are you passionate about? And I said...
Getting you out the way?
Yes, and getting to work.
Yeah.
And she said, well, have you read every single document on the TfL website? No. And I was like, well, I'm not a protester. I said, I'm not protesting something. And when you protest something, it's so simple. There are 2 questions. The first one, what do you want?
Yeah.
Get rid of oil. Okay, then the second one, and it's not unreasonable to say, okay, what do we use instead?
Yep.
And it was like I said at the top of the show. I have more sympathy. I hate their methods, but at least I have more sympathy with animal rebellion because we want to get rid of milk. Fine. What do you replace it with? Well, we've got oat milk. We've got almond milk. At least we've got a replacement. Actually, oat milk is lovely.
No.
Oh, oat milk's lovely.
Don't trust it. Don't trust it.
You don't trust it?
No.
Or does it look at you funny when you're putting it into coffee?
I don't like the amount of chemicals that's dumped into all these vegan products. I'd rather just drink cow's milk. That's it. It's for our ancestors. Done.
Well, I'm not brilliant with loads of dairy.
Right.
I've not found anything that goes better in tea.
Right.
I've never have. I can't. But an oat milk coffee is actually really lovely.
I mean, individual dietary requirements is completely different. But
but
if you want to dump it on the floor of a bougie supermarket just because you're crying,
stupid.
See, I've got my perfect treatments for how to treat them. Right. People have just said I'll walk up to them and go like that. Right. But the best one is in Germany the other day.
Oh, I love this story.
Yeah, Scientists' Rebellion decided to stage a sit-in and glue themselves to the floor of a Porsche dealership.
It wasn't a Volkswagen factory. I thought it was a factory for them. But anyway, cool.
They just decided to leave them there.
Yeah.
And so the security guards walking past and shining torches at them and going, "You're right, mate. There you go." They didn't leave them a bucket to relieve themselves in, so they had to do it next to each other.
Yeah, they were furious. They said, well, why aren't you supplying us? They said to the security guards, we've stuck ourselves to the floor here. Why aren't you supplying us with somewhere that we can defecate and food and drink?
Yep.
And they said, no. They said, well, they turned all the lights off, turned the heating off, and left.
Yeah, stupid games with stupid prizes. So that's it. Basically, they're all performative. It's like that woman who threw the soup at the painting. She did a TikTok. She's far posher than any of us. And she's just saying, it's fine, it had a glass casing, we wouldn't have actually damaged it. Oh, so you don't really believe in it then? You're just doing it for social media clicks. So all these people don't really believe in the cause. If you just show them the consequences of your own actions are, you're going to have to sleep next to your own feces, then good luck to you, have fun. We haven't got to deal with you. See you later.
Yeah. I mean, I've often said that if they glue themselves to the road, just I don't like... I had actually the Met Police yesterday. I don't mind if you close the road and walk off and leave them. Then I'll stomach the traffic.
Yeah, but don't give them tea and blankets.
Well, the police says to us, so I was stood in the road filming them.
Yeah.
And perhaps I shouldn't have been so angry with the Met Police, but they moved me aside. And they said, sorry, you've got to get out of the road.
Go away.
And I said...
Really?
No, why are you moving me out of the road and you're not moving them? And you know what the police officer said? Well, they've got a right to protest. And I said, what about my right to get home? So then, I mean, I probably shouldn't have done. So I stood in the road and said, well, I'm protesting.
Yep.
I said, I'm protesting. And then I'm protesting then. And I thought, well, I don't really want to get myself arrested. So I, like a good citizen, I complied and I moved over. But I just thought, well, I said, why aren't you moving them? Well, we've got to go through a procedure to move them. And now
it's this.
Yeah. And you've got to put them in handcuffs. And there was, bless her heart, an old dear who was sat on a seat with just up oil as well.
Sorry, but if you've become an apparatus of basically endorsing a climate dictatorship, I don't care how old you are, how polite you are. That's it. You can go. No, go on.
The thing is, what is frustrating is that I think most people are actually on board with us wanting to have cleaner air, more sustainable electricity and fuels, and a better way for us to heat our homes and all
energy
those sorts of
independence.
things. Without a doubt,
sensible.
Where it's political is the means by which we get there.
Exactly.
But what's frustrating is they're pushing an open door because people actually, when you look at survey after survey, most people already agree with the aims, not the methods that they're using, but the aims. Of course, people want to use less oil if we've got a more environmentally friendly way of doing it. Of course they do. But you need to have the more environmentally friendly way in place.
Or why aren't they investing in carbon capture? Because if you did carbon capture, you wouldn't need to stop oil. You just capture the carbon and repurpose it to build wind turbines. Because they're all built out of carbon fibre anyway. It's not like they're going to be carbon neutral either.
Absolutely agreed. No one is arguing for dirty air. No one's arguing for, let's make it worse for everyone. Of course not, because people are generally sensible and aren't complete morons.
Yep.
So it's annoying that they're just pushing, again, an open door, and I don't know why they're doing that. But then again, so many of these organisations do that, and so many of our governments and local politicians do that as well. By the way, they're going to continue occupying Westminster. Every day in October, they're going to meet at Downing Street and Whitehall, and they're going to do that at 11 a.m. They're not going to be able to get there for 9, let's be honest.
Well, the Dartford Bridge one has already resulted in 2 women that were involved in the car crash not making it to hospital. And we shut the bridge fearing that they could fall off. Meanwhile, 2 women have died, innocent women have died in their stead. So drive around them, leave them there, leave them to suffer for all I care.
Well, there was a funeral. Like I said yesterday on Kingsway, there was a funeral, and people were going up, there's a funeral down there, mate. They need to get through, and
banality
imagine
of evil.
That. Imagine that you're burying the relative.
Yeah.
Okay, let's now cross live. Are we done? Are we done with Connor?
Oh, thanks.
Oh, sorry, babes.
Oh,
you have to go. But come back again soon.
Yeah, absolutely will.
That's Connor, and we will have him again soon. I'm sorry you can't stay for Femi.
Yep. I won't be serenaded.
Oh, you're here.
Oh,
I didn't know you were coming in. You're going to swap under. You're going to go under. There we go. Perfect.
There we go.
Thank you. That's Connor gone.